The memorial photos were arranged perfectly on the coffee table. The widow's black dress was pressed and ready. But when Ellen DeGeneres introduced the surprise guest, everything Sarah thought she knew about her life shattered in front of 300 people. It was supposed to be a celebration of healing. Sarah Mitchell had written to The Ellen Show 6 months after the 3rd anniversary of her husband David's death. Her letter was heartbreaking but hopeful, describing how she'd finally found the strength to start living again after losing him in what police had called a fatal car accident. "I want to show other widows that life can be beautiful again," Sarah had written. "David would want me to be happy. I know he's watching over me, and I want to honor his memory by helping others heal." Ellen's producers had been moved by Sarah's story, a 34-year-old woman who'd spent 3 years rebuilding her life after tragedy, now dedicating herself to helping other grieving spouses through support groups and online communities. The segment was designed to showcase Sarah's journey from grief to purpose. Ellen had planned to surprise her with a scholarship fund established in David's name, allowing other widows to attend grief counseling programs Sarah had developed. But the real surprise was sitting in Ellen's green room, waiting. David Mitchell, very much alive, had contacted the show after seeing Sarah's appearance advertised on social media. His call to the producers had been frantic, desperate. "You don't understand," he'd told them. "I need to explain to my wife why I left. She thinks I'm dead, but I've been trying to find the courage to come back for 3 years." The producers had been skeptical at first. Death hoaxes weren't uncommon in television. But David had provided documentation, photos, proof that he was indeed Sarah's husband who had staged his own death to escape debts and start over. Ellen herself had spoken with David hours before the taping. His story was complicated, filled with shame and regret. Gambling debts, threats from dangerous people, a moment of cowardice that had spiraled into 3 years of living under a false identity. "I know what I did was unforgivable," David had told Ellen. "But I love my wife. I never meant for her to suffer this long." Ellen had wrestled with whether to proceed. This wasn't the feel-good reunion show was known for. This was potential devastation played out on national television. But David had begged her. "She deserves to know the truth, and I need to face what I've done." The show began normally. Ellen's opening monologue, audience warm-up, the usual energy that made her program America's favorite daytime escape. Sarah sat in the green room, nervous but excited about her upcoming segment. When Ellen introduced her, Sarah walked onto the stage with dignity and grace. She wore a simple black dress, not because she was still in mourning, but because it had been David's favorite, a way of honoring him during what she believed was a celebration of moving forward. "Sarah," Ellen said warmly, "tell us about David. What kind of man was he?" Sarah's face lit up with memories. "He was my best friend. We met in college, married young, dreamed of traveling the world together." Her voice caught slightly. "The hardest part about losing him wasn't just losing my husband. It was losing my future." Ellen nodded sympathetically. "But you found a way to honor his memory by helping others." "I had to," Sarah replied. "The grief almost destroyed me. But I realized David wouldn't want me to stop living. He'd want me to use this pain to help other people." The audience was moved by Sarah's strength, her grace in discussing loss, her commitment to helping others heal. Ellen could see why the producers had wanted to feature her story. "Sarah," Ellen said, "we wanted to do something special for you today. To honor David's memory and support the incredible work you're doing." Sarah wiped away a tear. "Just being here, sharing his story, means everything to me." Ellen paused, looking directly into the camera. "But we have something else. A surprise that I need to prepare you for." Something in Ellen's tone made Sarah's smile falter. There was a weight to her words that didn't match the celebratory atmosphere. "Sarah," Ellen continued carefully, "sometimes life gives us information that changes everything we thought we knew. And sometimes we have to be brave enough to face truths that are difficult to accept." Sarah's hands began to tremble slightly. "Ellen, you're scaring me. What's happening?" Ellen stood up, and walked closer to Sarah. I need you to know that whatever happens next, you're not alone. You have this entire audience. You have me, and you have people who care about you. Ellen, please, Sarah whispered. What are you trying to tell me? Ellen took a deep breath. Sarah, we've been contacted by someone who says he knows about David. Someone who has information about what really happened 3 years ago. Sarah's face went pale. What kind of information? Someone who says David didn't die in that car accident. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gripped the arms of her chair, her breathing becoming shallow. That's impossible. I identified his body. I buried him. Ellen knelt down beside Sarah's chair. I know this is overwhelming, but this person has provided documentation, proof that the accident was staged. No, Sarah shook her head violently. No, that can't be true. David is dead. I've spent 3 years grieving him. I've built my entire life around his memory. Ellen's voice was gentle, but firm. Sarah, this person wants to explain what happened, to tell you why he made the choices he made. Sarah's eyes widened as the implication hit her. Ellen, are you telling me that David is alive? The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Yes, Ellen said simply. David is here. He's been living under another identity, and he wants to apologize to you. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. This is not possible. This is not happening. Her voice rose to near hysteria. I mourned him. I held his funeral. I scattered his ashes. Ellen reached for Sarah's hand, but she pulled away. Sarah, I know this is shocking, but he's here, and he wants to explain. Explain what? Sarah screamed, her composure completely shattered. How do you explain letting your wife think you're dead for 3 years? How do you explain watching her destroy herself with grief? The audience was frozen in horror. This wasn't entertainment. This was a woman's world collapsing in real time. Ellen looked toward the wings where David was waiting. She'd never felt less prepared for a moment in 15 years of hosting. Do you want to see him? Ellen asked softly. Sarah's laugh was bitter, broken. Do I want to see my dead husband? Do I want to look at the man who let me plan his funeral? She wiped tears from her face. Yes, I want to see him. I want to ask him how he could do this to me. Ellen gestured toward the wings. David emerged slowly, hesitantly. He looked older, thinner, worn down by 3 years of living a lie. When Sarah saw him, she collapsed back into her chair. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Hello, Sarah, David said quietly. You son of a bitch, Sarah whispered, her voice filled with a pain so deep it seemed to come from her soul. You're alive. David took a step closer, then stopped when Sarah held up her hand. Don't come near me. Sarah, I can explain. Explain? Sarah's voice cracked. You want to explain why you let me think you were dead? Why you let me blame myself for not being able to save you? Ellen watched this unfold with growing horror. She'd thought she was facilitating a reunion. Instead, she was witnessing the destruction of a woman who'd spent years rebuilding herself. I was in trouble, David began. I owed money to dangerous people. They were threatening you, threatening us. I thought if I disappeared. You thought if you died, Sarah corrected viciously. You didn't disappear, David. You died. I held your body. I kissed your forehead goodbye. David's face crumpled. That wasn't me, Sarah. I paid someone who looked like me. Someone who died in an accident. I switched the dental records, the fingerprints. Stop. Sarah stood up again, her entire body shaking. Just stop talking. Every word you say makes this worse. Ellen made a decision that went against every television instinct she'd ever developed. We need to stop taping, she announced. Clear the studio, now. The audience began to file out, understanding that they'd witnessed something too private, too devastating for public consumption. Ellen remained with Sarah and David, the cameras still rolling but the audience gone. Sarah, Ellen said gently, you don't have to do this here. You don't have to do this now. No, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. I want to do this now. I want him to explain to me how someone fakes their own death and lives with themselves for 3 years. David sank into a chair across from her. I tried to come back so many times, but every month that passed made it harder. I saw you on the news talking about your grief support groups. I saw how you turned your pain into something beautiful. My pain, Sarah's laugh was hollow. You think my pain was beautiful? You think watching me rebuild myself from nothing was inspiring? I saw how strong you'd become. I became strong because I had to. Sarah screamed. I became strong because my husband was dead. I learned to live again because I thought he was never coming back. Ellen felt tears running down her own face. In 15 years of television, she'd never felt more helpless. Where have you been? Sarah asked, her voice now deadly quiet. For 3 years, where have you been while I've been learning to live without you? David's answer came in a whisper. Phoenix. I've been in Phoenix, working construction under the name James Patterson. Alone. The pause that followed was enough of an answer. Not alone, Sarah said. Not a question, but a statement. Sarah, not alone, she repeated, louder this time. David looked at the floor. Her name is Lisa. We've been together for 2 years. The sound Sarah made wasn't quite a scream, and wasn't quite a sob. It was something primal, something that came from the deepest part of human anguish. Ellen stood up and walked between them. That's enough. David, you need to leave. Now. Ellen, I came here to make things right. You came here to ease your own guilt, Ellen said firmly. You didn't think about what this would do to Sarah. You thought about what it would do for you. Sarah was doubled over in her chair, rocking back and forth. He's been alive. For 3 years he's been alive, and happy with someone else, while I've been visiting his grave. Ellen knelt beside her. Sarah, look at me. Look at me. Sarah raised her head, her face streaked with tears and mascara. You are not responsible for his choices, Ellen said firmly. You rebuilt your life based on the information you had. You honored what you thought was his memory. You helped other people heal. None of that was wasted, but it was all based on a lie, Sarah whispered. No, Ellen said. It was based on your love, and love is never a lie, even when everything else is. David tried to speak again, but Ellen cut him off. You need to go. Sarah doesn't owe you forgiveness. She doesn't owe you understanding. You made your choice 3 years ago. Security appeared at Ellen's signal, not threatening but present. David stood slowly. Sarah, he said one last time, I know I don't deserve it, but I hope someday you can forgive me. Sarah looked up at him with eyes that held no anger anymore, only exhaustion. I already forgave you, David. 3 years ago, when I thought you were dead, I forgave you for every fight we ever had, every mistake you ever made. I forgave you for leaving me. She stood up, her voice growing stronger. But I can't forgive this. I can't forgive you for letting me think I'd lost the love of my life when really, you just didn't want me anymore. David left the stage, escorted by security. Ellen remained with Sarah in the empty studio, under the bright lights that had witnessed so much joy and now this devastating truth. What happens now? Sarah asked. Ellen took her hands. Now you grieve again. But this time, you're not grieving the loss of David. You're grieving the loss of the David you thought he was. I don't know how to do that. The same way you did it before, Ellen said, one day at a time. But Sarah, you need to know something. The woman you became in these 3 years, the strength you found, the people you helped, that's real, that's yours. He can't take that away from you. Sarah nodded slowly. I need to call my grief group. They need to know that their leader's entire story was a lie. Your story wasn't a lie, Ellen insisted. Your grief was real. Your healing was real. Your decision to help others was real. Those things don't change because his story was false. Subscribe and leave a comment because this story isn't over yet. The episode never aired. Ellen made the decision immediately after taping to keep the footage private. Some moments are too sacred, too devastating to become entertainment. But Ellen stayed in touch with Sarah. In the weeks that followed, Ellen connected her with therapists who specialized in betrayal trauma, lawyers who could help her navigate the legal implications of David's faked death, and most importantly, with other women who'd experienced similar betrayals. The grief support group Sarah had built didn't fall apart when they learned the truth. Instead, they rallied around her, proving that the healing they'd found together was genuine, regardless of how their leader's journey had begun. Sarah discovered that David had collected life insurance money that was rightfully hers. She donated it all to a foundation for people dealing with traumatic loss, ensuring that David's deception would ultimately serve others who needed help. 6 months later, Sarah appeared on Ellen's show again. This time she came to talk about a different kind of grief. The grief of discovering that someone you loved never existed the way you believed they did. "I learned something important," Sarah told Ellen and the audience. "You can grieve someone who's still alive. You can mourn the loss of who you thought they were, while still being grateful for who you became because of that loss." Sarah's new book, Grieving the Living, became a bestseller. She spoke at conferences about betrayal trauma, about rebuilding identity after deception, about finding truth in the midst of lies. David tried to contact her several times over the following year. Through lawyers, through mutual friends, through letters she never opened. Sarah had meant what she said that day. She had forgiven him 3 years ago for being imperfect, but she couldn't forgive him for choosing to let her suffer unnecessarily. Ellen learned something that day too, that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is protect someone from their own story. That television has a responsibility that goes beyond entertainment. The memorial photos Sarah had brought that day were never displayed. Instead, she took them home and burned them in her backyard. Not out of anger, but out of recognition that the man in those photos had never really existed. In their place, she put up photos of the women she'd helped heal, the lives she'd touched, the strength she'd built from what she thought was devastation but was actually liberation. Sarah never remarried, not because she couldn't trust again, but because she'd learned that she didn't need someone else to complete her story. She was whole on her own, shaped by grief that had been real even when its cause had been false. The empty studio where her world had collapsed became, in her memory, the place where her real life had begun. Not the life built on mourning someone who didn't deserve her tears, but the life built on understanding her own resilience. Ellen kept a photo from that day in her dressing room. Not of the moment when David appeared, but of the moment when Sarah stood up and reclaimed her own story. It reminded her that sometimes the most powerful television happens when the cameras stop rolling and humanity takes over. Because some betrayals are so deep, they become gifts. Some lies are so devastating they reveal truth. And sometimes, discovering that your life was built on deception is exactly what you need to build it on something real.